unmoved by white tears. Most of us are unmoved by white tears because we don't actually think they're real. It's a performance. It's a switch that you turn on because you know that we have been socialized to see you as more human and of more value. So whatever it is you think and whatever it is you feel, we are supposed to respond to it. Y'all don't respond to Black women crying the same way. Nobody does. Nobody does. The minute a white woman cries, the world has to stop. Oh my God, what's wrong with you, baby? Black women cry, we could be rolling around on the ground screaming. And you are moved because you've been socialized not to see us as human beings. Fuck. Our tears don't matter to you, but a white woman, and y'all know that shit. That's why I'm not here for the fragility. You know that.
In my previous video, I spoke about how the Black community needs to stop allowing people to come in and use their emotions against them, puppeteering them in order to use them as the face of their own message. I also stated how if we allow these people to do what they're doing to Kanye, it won't be very long before they're doing it to just any old Black person that they feel they can do it to. And what do we have here once again? Apparently, Kyrie Irving shared a post to a film that is being called Antisemitic. So today we're going to get into a real good topic and conversation because I'm tired of this. So the topics for today: Jewish fragility versus anti-Semitism. The second, the Jewish role in Black oppression. Third, how Jewish people became white. And fourth will be my closing statements. And this is going to be more of a structured video because there's a lot of information that I'm going to be bringing forth. And at the end of this video, I would like my community to be more informed on the weaponization of the term anti-Semitic or anti-Semitism, because that's what it is. It is a weapon, it is a tool, and I am going to show and prove with receipts here today. So, kick back, relax, and let's get started.
In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters to all communists in the United States. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist, or Nazi, or anti-Semitic, or anti-Semitic, or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
Well, I was going to say that colleges, this all started in colleges and universities and not wanting to make kids uncomfortable. And we talked about it once here on the show with actually Van Jones when he said, if I send my kids to school, I want them to be uncomfortable. I want people to push back on their beliefs because otherwise we're not preparing kids to go out into the real world. We're preparing them for a world that doesn't exist outside of their own house.
Well, also, if you're going to do this, then let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
Ethnicity.
It's,
Well,
no,
consider
it's
Jews
about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about
Well,
race.
what is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
But it's about white supremacy. It's
Well,
about
but
going
it's not-
after
it's
Jews
not about
and
race.
gypsies and
But these are two
Romans.
white groups of people. But these are two
Romans.
white groups of people. But these are two
Romans.
white groups of people.
Well, they
How
were
do we
after black
They
people,
didn't see
too.
them as white.
And they were
But
after
you're missing the
homosexuals.
point. You're
Yeah.
missing the point.
Yeah.
The minute you turn it into race, it goes down this alley. Let's talk about it for what it is. It's how people treat each other. It's a problem. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, because black, white, Jews, everybody eats each other. So is it, if you're uncomfortable, if you hear about mouse, should you be worried? Should your child say, oh my God, I wonder if that's me? No, that's not what they're gonna say. They're gonna say, I don't wanna be like that.
Well, hopefully. I don't want to be cruel.
Yeah,
And
most kids, they don't want to be cruel.
No, they don't. And we're living in we're living in an era where people are comparing vaccine cards to the yellow stars, where people are comparing vaccinations to what Anne Frank went through. Yeah. So it is necessary for kids to learn about the Holocaust.
To learn about man's inhumanity to man, however it exposes itself.
Boy, oh boy, did Whoopi piss off some folk when she said what she said. But to be honest with you, she wasn't really wrong when she said these were two groups of white people. So why were they really mad? Well, instead of speculating, let's go into the article and figure that out. Whoopi Goldberg was suspended for 2 weeks Tuesday as co-host of The View because of what the head of NBC News calls her wrong and hurtful comments about Jews and the Holocaust. While Whoopi has apologized, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. The entire ABC News organization stands in solidarity with our Jewish colleagues, friends, family, and communities. ABC News President Kim Goodwin said in a statement. The suspension came a day after Goldberg's comment during the discussion on The View that race was not a factor in the Holocaust. Goldberg apologized hours later and again on Tuesday morning's episode, but the original remarks drew condemnation from several predominant Jewish leaders. My words upset so many people, which was never my intentions, she said Tuesday morning. I understand why now, and for that I am deeply, deeply grateful, because the information I got was really helpful and helped me understand some different things. Goldberg made her original comments during a discussion on the show Monday about a Tennessee school board's banning of Maus, a Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel about the Nazi death camps during World War II. She said the Holocaust was not about race. It was about man's inhumanity to other man. I misspoke, Goldberg said at the opening of Tuesday's show. The flare-up over Goldberg's remarks this weekend highlighted the enduring complexity of some race-related issues, including the widespread but strongly contested notion that only people of color can be victims of racism. Effective immediately, I'm suspending Whoopi Goldberg for 2 weeks for her wrong and hurtful comments, Goodwin said in her statement. The View brought on Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO of the Anti-Defamation League and the author of It Can Happen Here, on Tuesday to discuss why her words had been hurtful. Jewish people at the moment are feeling besieged, Greenblatt said. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, praised Goldberg for being outspoken over the years on social issues, but said he struggled to understand her statement on the Holocaust. The only explanation that I have for it is that there is a new definition of racism that has been put out there in the public recently that defines racism exclusively as the targeting of people of color, and obviously history teaches us otherwise, Cooper said. Kenneth D. Marcus, chairman of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, linked Goldberg's remark to a broader misconception of the Holocaust, Jewish identity, and anti-Semitism. In her error, she was reflecting a misunderstanding of Jewish identity that is both widespread and dangerous, that is sometimes described as erasive anti-Semitism, said Marcus, who is the author of The Definition of Anti-Semitism. It is the notion that Jews should be viewed only as white privileged oppressors, he said. It denies Jewish identity and involves a whitewashing of Jewish history. Marcus referred to the use of anti-Jewish stereotypes about being powerful, controlling, and sinister, coupled with downplaying or denying anti-Semitism. So one must now ask, was Whoopi's statements an error? Was Whoopi incorrect when she said this was about man's inhumanity to other men? Well, we have to ask another question in order to answer that question. And that question would be, is Jewish or the Jew or being a Jew? Is that a race? In order to answer that question, we got to come over to this site, JewFAQ.org. Judaism 101. Let's read what this is. Judaism 101, or JewFAQ, is an online encyclopedia of Judaism covering Jewish beliefs, people, places, things, language, scriptures, holidays, practices, and customs written from a traditional perspective in conversational language you can understand. And with that being said, what is Judaism? Let's go. The level, basic, which means this is basic understanding. It should be basic understanding. But let's see. What does it say? What is Judaism? What does it mean to be a Jew? Most people, both Jewish and Gentile, would instinctively say that Judaism is a religion. And yet, there are militant atheists who insist that they are Jews. Is Judaism a race? If you were to say so, most Jews would think you were an anti-Semite. Let me read that again. Is Judaism a race? If you were to say so, most Jews would think that you were an anti-Semite. So what is Judaism? Is Judaism a religion? Clearly there is a religion called Judaism, a set of ideas about the world and the way that we should live our lives. That's called Judaism. It is studied in religious study courses and taught to Jewish children in Hebrew school. See What Do Jews Believe for details. There is a lot of flexibility about certain aspects of those beliefs, and a lot of disagreements about specifics. But the flexibility is built into the organized system of belief that is Judaism. However, many people who call themselves Jews do not believe in that religion at all. More than half of all Jews in Israel today call themselves secular and do not believe in God or any of the religious beliefs of Judaism. Half of all Jews in the United States do not belong to a synagogue. They may practice some of the rituals of Judaism and celebrate some of the holidays, but they do not think of these actions as religious activities. Most traditional Jews and most liberal Jews and everyone in between would agree that these secular people are still Jews, regardless of their beliefs. See, who is a Jew? Clearly, then, there is more to being Jewish than just a religion. Are Jews a race? In 1980s, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Jews are a race, at least for purposes of certain anti-discrimination laws. Their reasoning, at the time these laws were passed, people routinely spoke of the Jewish race or the Italian race as well as the Negro race. So that is what the litigators intended to protect. But many Jews were deeply offended by this decision, offended by any hint that Jews could be considered a race. Well, why is that? The idea of the Jew as a race brings to mind nightmarish visions of Nazi Germany, where Jews were declared not just a race, but as an inferior race that had to be rounded up into ghettos and exterminated like vermin. But setting aside the emotional issues, Jews are clearly not a race. Race is a genetic distinction and refers to people with shared ancestry and shared genetic traits. You can't change your race. It's in your DNA. I could never become black or Asian, no matter how much I might want to. Common ancestry is not required to be a Jew. Many Jews worldwide share common ancestry, as shown by genetic research. However, you can be a Jew without sharing this common ancestry. For example, by converting. Thus, although I could never become a black or Asian, blacks and Asians have become Jews. Sammy Davis Jr. and Connie Chung. If you would like to read this article, I will put this link into the description box because it goes on. Is it a culture or ethnicity group? Nope. Is it a nation? Not at all. And it explains why it isn't a nation. But for the most part, the Jewish people are a family. So, let's get back to the question. Was Whoopi incorrect about it not being a race issue? Well, from what we just read, clearly it states that Judaism isn't a race. Clearly it states that it is not a race. So it couldn't have been a race issue. If anything, it would fall under religious persecution. And it isn't that the Germans didn't have any concept of race either, because when you go to the Holocaust Encyclopedia, you're able to read about the black Germans and the black Jews who were persecuted as well. So if it wasn't about race, what was all the hoopla about with getting Whoopi suspended and canceled for that little bit of time? Well, the article says it better than I can. Whoopi Goldberg was suspended for 2 weeks Tuesday as a co-host of The View because of what the head of ABC News called her wrong and hurtful comments. Now, we've established that her comments wasn't necessarily wrong. So what would that make her comments? Hurtful. And this becomes a pattern when you start really looking into these anti-Semitic claims. Nets owner Joe Tsai, I believe it's Tsai, issued a statement Friday night condemning Kyrie Irving's decision to promote an anti-Semitic film and book on his social media account. Now, I saw several different articles about this, and one in particular really caught my eye, and we're going to dive deep into the reasoning that I saw. So I post on Twitter, I'm disappointed that Kyrie appears to support a film based on a book full of anti-Semitic disinformation. I want to sit down and make sure he understands this is hurtful to all of us. And as a man of faith, it is wrong to promote hurtful blah, blah, blah. And so this man, Brian Wick, comes in and he says, Kyrie is not a child. Stop treating him as such. He knows exactly what he's doing. A stern talking to from a disappointed owner is not going to change anything. Use the methods at your disposal to actually hold him accountable. Once again, we see the pattern of take away their money. Use the methods at your disposal to actually hold him accountable. So what methods are those? mess up his money, use the media against him, use every person who feels this way against him. But what was said, what really made people react to this? I came across this article from the ADL, Hebrews to Negroes, What You Need to Know. And there are some points that it make that it claims that the film make. And again, as I said, I have not seen the film. But I do want to go over some of these points. The 2018 film Hebrews to Negroes, based on the director Ron Dalton Jr.'s book series of the same name, is a 3+ hour effort to prove the Black Hebrew Israelites BHI belief that certain people of color, including Black Americans, are the true descendants of the biblical Israelites. The film promotes the belief commonly found amongst anti-Semitics and extremist factions of the BHI movement, including claims that the modern Jews are imposters who stole the religious heritage of the black people and have engaged in a cover-up to prevent black people from knowing their true identities. While much of the film deals with historical and genetic arguments about various racial and ethnic groups, it also includes extensive anti-Semitism, including claims of a global Jewish conspiracy to oppress and defraud black people, allegations that Jews are in part responsible for the transatlantic slave trade, and the claims that Jews falsified the history of the Holocaust in order to conceal their nature and protect their status and power. I'm not going to speak to the quote-unquote global Jewish conspiracy to oppress and defraud black people. However, we have to understand in that statement there is some truth and there might be some falsified information there. And the truth is, history shows that Jewish people within the Jewish community, not all Jewish people, but people within the Jewish community, have historically participated in not just the transporting of slaves, but the insuring of slaves and also the actual ownership of slaves. And we're going to get into that a little bit more once we get into the second and third segments. The film also amplifies long-standing anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish power, control, and greed, including false claims that Jews control the media and disputes the identity of modern Jews, claiming they are religious converts who descended from the Khazars and have no historical connection to the land of Israel. In case you don't see the trick bag, I'm going to show you the trick bag that the ADL actually used in this article. But we're going to get to that in a minute. Let's finish going through this. To support his claims, the film cites statements from predominant anti-Semites and notorious anti-Semitic texts as supposed evidence of the true nature and identity of Jewish people. For example, the film includes passages from Henry Ford's The International Jew and two purported, though seemingly fabricated, quotations from Adolf Hitler. And let me just say, if the film does use anti-Semitic texts and things like that, that's a shame, because you really don't need to do that. If you want to prove your point, all you have to do is really use the text presented to you by the Jewish community. And another thing, I realize that, it does give a statement about Hitler, and it says that though it's seemingly fabricated. Do you know where you can get unfabricated information about what Hitler said and things that he said? In Hitler's manifesto, which is sold on Amazon on the same platform that this film is actually on as well. Just a little something to think about. And like I said, we're going to talk about the participation within slavery and the involvement of black oppression within the next segment. But first, let's address the allegations of this so-called myth. When I was younger, I did a lot of studying within the Jewish religion because I had just left the church, and my understanding at the time was that the Bible in itself came from the Torah, and so why would I go with the translation of the translation of the translation? Why don't I just go directly to the source? And that was before I found out that that wasn't the actual source, but still, that's neither here nor there. But I studied a lot within the Jewish religion, and I studied the Khazars. And one of the things that I see right here is the spelling of the Khazars. And when you spell Khazars like this, you'll pull up a bunch of different articles where they're being disputed in history and things like that. They're a myth. They never existed, this, that, and the third. Well, we can actually prove that wrong if you go to the correct sites and if you spell it correctly. Here's an example. If you go to the Jewish Encyclopedia website and spell Khazars the way that I spell it here, notice the difference between this and this. You see, they don't just hide things in the book. The way that they hide things in the book is the way that they rename and respell things. But now we're going to jump into this article and to see what the Khazar is. They said it's a myth, but in the Jewish Encyclopedia, it's not showing as a myth. So let's see. Let's check it out. And if you would like to read this whole article, trust me when I say all you have to do is do what I just showed you, okay? Because I want you to see that you can pull this stuff up with ease, okay? And who is this written by? Herman Rosenthal. So it's written by a Jewish man, okay? This is important because this is why I say we don't need to use any anti-Semitic texts or any type of anti-Semites when you're trying to prove this point, because the points are already proven in their literature. In the literature in itself. I don't want to say their literature, but in the literature that they present. So, let's get to this article written by Herman Rosenthal. A people of Turkish origins whose life and history are interwoven with the very beginnings of the history of the Jews of Russia. The kingdom of the Khazar was firmly established in most of South Russia long before, the foundation of the Russian monarch by the Varangians, 855. Jews have lived on the shore of the Black and the Caspian Sea since the 1st century of the Common Era. Historical evidence points to the region of the Ural as the home of the Khazar. Did you get that? Region of the Ural. Okay. It goes on to say that among the classical writers of the Middle Ages, they were known as the Chozars, the Khazirs, the Akazirs, and the Akatir. I know I probably slaughtered all of those things, but it's okay. Let's go. And in the Russian chronicles as Kowalises and Ugri Bailayi. Man, I tell you about these names. But let's skip down to the bottom where it says this. Embracing Judaism. I wonder what this will say. Let's get down to the bottom to the meat and potatoes. So we're going to start right here. And please feel free to read along. According to A. Harkarvi, Masif Netahim, the conversation took place in 620, according to others in 740. King Joseph, in his letter to Hasde Ibn Shaprut, okay, about 960, gives the following account of the conversation. Some centuries ago, King Bulan reigned over the Khazars. To him, God appeared in a dream and promised him might and glory. Encouraged by this dream, Bulan went by the road of Darlan to the country of Ardabil, where he gained great victories over the Arabs. The Byzantine emperor and the caliph of the Ishmaelites sent to him envoys with presents and sages to convert him to their respective religions. Bulan invited also wise men of Israel and proceeded to examine them all, as each of the champions believed his religion to be the best. Bulan separately questioned the Mohammedans and Christians as which of the other two religions they considered the better. When both gave preference to that of the Jew, that king perceived that it must be the true religion. He therefore adopted it. He therefore adopted it. He therefore adopted it. So why is it that ADL is blatantly telling a lie, saying that it is a Khazarian myth? Myth means that it's not true. But the facts show, right in the Jewish encyclopedia, the facts to be otherwise. They not only existed, but it gives you a time that they converted and why they converted. Let's move on to the next. This is a book called Pictorial History of Israel by Jacob A. Rubin and Meir Barkai. I want you to see what's on page 9. This is like the first picture that you're going to see when you open this book. And what does this look like? Don't those look like black people? And if you read what it says at the bottom, it tells you exactly that those black people are Israelites. Let's read it, shall we? This mural depicting Israel's bondage in Egypt was found in the Theban tomb of Rikmir, governor and vizier at the time of Thutmose III, about 1450 BCE. If you want to hide anything from a black man, put it in a book. Because right here specifically tells you, they're specifically telling you who the Hebrews were. First page that shows a picture is this picture. Is this picture. So, are you anti-Semitic for saying the same things that their own writers and authors have already described and depicted as well?
One of them wrote letters to Israel when it became a state. And they said, we're Israelites out in Africa. You know, everyone laughed at them and they said, African Israelites, these people are just trying to jump on the first world country bandwagon. They're living in a third world country. They got nothing. We're coming to Israel. We got innovation, technology. So they're trying to get on this train because there's such a thing called the right of return. All descendants of the Jewish people from around the world are able to move to Israel. So they said we are also. And everyone kind of laughed at them, like I said. And a few people took it serious and went out there and started studying them, learned about their culture. And a professor from Duke University went out there and did DNA testing on them. And he showed not only did they share Semitic genes from people who were in Yemen and back to the Middle East, these gentlemen, a large percent of them, have the Y chromosome to be Kohanim, to be priests. Now, if anyone who doesn't know, a priest is a specific family clan of the nation of Israel, who come from Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was the first priest. And anyone descended from Aaron has the status title priest. And we found that these men in this village in South Africa called Lemba, L-E-M-B-A, carry this genetic marker to let us know that they share the same as from the Sephardic and the Ashkenaz and the population of the people in Israel today. They share the same exact DNA marker. That's mind-blowing. So everyone kind of got humbled a little bit, who laughed at them and said, now what? Now what do we do about this? This could have tremendous implications. Another area in Africa you have something big happening is in Nigeria. You have the Igbo people, or Igbo, pronounced either way. There's 40 million of them, also Christians, like I spoke about before, how that could happen to the children of Israel very easily. But also a lot of them are now coming out and converting back or adopting the rules of the Torah without all the paganism that they've been practicing for hundreds of years. There's been books written about it from scholars in Nigeria, from scholars from the Jewish people. And where it gets interesting is, in America, there was a slave trade. And a lot of the slaves, a very high percentage of them, came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. So what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there. And most likely, maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today who are white, Caucasian people came in a little bit later on. We know that some of the greatest sages of the transmission of the Torah were converts from Rome. You have a man named Onkelos who wrote a commentary on the Torah, unprecedented, that we still learn today. He was a convert. Some of the largest pillars on the transmission today were Roman converts. So here we are, we're Caucasian Jewish people, and now you have people in Africa saying that they're the real people of Israel. It can't be ruled out at all.
The film also amplifies long-standing anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish power, control, and greed, including false claims that Jews control the media. Well, let's take a look at that too. This is a chart from 2013 called Who Controls Your Mind? I know what a lot of people are going to say. This is probably outdated, but we'll get to that in a second. Everyone in red here are people of Jewish descent who have predominant roles in the media. Now, like I said, I understand that this is from 2013, and who's to say that these people even still hold these positions? So let's look at this article here. The Big Six, Modern Media Control. Now, this is from May 9th of 2022. Okay? This is the Big Six media companies. Okay? So let's look at it and see what this says. These top 6 companies control 90% of the media in the United States. Just 37 years ago, there were 50 companies in charge of most American media. Now, 90% of the media in the United States is controlled by just 6 corporations: AT&T, CBS, Comcast, Disney, News Corp, and Viacom. This means that just 232 media executives are calling the shots for the vast majority of the information we are presented with, controlling a total Big Six net worth of over $430 billion. We can see an even better breakdown when we go into this article here. The 6 corporations that own almost all media. National Amusements. And the owner of this company is Sumner Redstone, worth $4.6 billion. let's take a look at the assets in which he owns. AXS TV, BET, all of the BETs, CBS, all of the CBSs, Showcase, Centric, Nickelodeon, all of the Nickelodeons, CW, Showtime, Spike, Viacom, VH1, the CW, Paramount, MTV, all of the MTVs, Pop, Classics, CMT, Epic. It goes on and on and on. Let's see what else he owns. In the internet department, CBS Interactive, Lost FM, GameSpot, TV.com, TV Guide, GameFAQs, ZDNet, CNET, 24/7 Sports, Roll Show, and so on, so on. And it just so happened that Samir is a part of the Jewish community. Bob Iger at Disney. And Disney owned A&E, all of those, ABC, all of those, of course, Disney, ESPN, all of those, History Channel, all of those, Lucasfilms, Marvel, every subsidiary to that, Vice, History Channel, Disney Junior, all that stuff, FYI, Laugh. Yeah, everything you see here, this is what they own. And let's see what else they own. Marvel Comics, Imagine Academy, Lucas Books, Hyperion, Icon, so on, GameStar, so on. And Iger just so happened to be a part of the Jewish community as well. Jeff Bukes over at Time Warner. And they hold the assets to Adult Swim, Boomerang, CNN, all of them, HBO, all of them, Hulu, Mad, CW, True TV, Warner Brothers, Turner, TCM, New Line Cinema, TBS, TNT, Cartoon Network, Access Health, Castle Rock, Cinemax, DC, Time Life, Rocksteady, Warner Gaming, all the Warner Gaming subsidiaries. There's also all those investments. Warner Brothers Music Group, Time Warner Internet. And yes, Mr. Bukes is a part of the Jewish community as well. Moving along, Brian Roberts over at Comcast. They own All Sports, Big Idea, Bravo, Chiller, E! Entertainment, CNBC, Fandango, Illumination, Hulu, Focus, IMD, NHL, Sci-Fi, USA Network, the Weather Channel, Universal, NBC Universal, all of those. Let's see what else. Comcast, Xfinity, TiVo, and the rest of these ventures in the media. And yes, Mr. Roberts is a part of the Jewish community. Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox and Voyage and Cult and all the other media properties you see before you, FX and things like that, he is not a part of the Jewish community. Then we have Kazuo Huare, might have said that wrong, over at Sony, who owns all the Sony properties, True, and PlayStation, things like that, Crackle. Yeah, so these are the 6 companies. So out of the 6 major media companies in the United States, 4 of them are either owned or ran by people within the Jewish community. That's a huge percentage. Would I say that they run the media? Not so much. But what I would say is people within the Jewish community has a large influence over what people see in the media, mainstream or otherwise. And let me make myself clear, when I speak about people in the Jewish community, I'm not meaning your average person that you would go and see on the streets. I'm not talking about the person that you would see walking in your grocery stores and things like that. I'm talking about the people who actually have control and stake in these companies, these executive positions. And we also know that this isn't just within the media. When you look at basketball is the same thing. Why are so many pro basketball owners Jewish? Like Donald Sterling? Yeah. And it's funny because they make jokes of it. It would be hard to find a Jew on the court in the National Basketball Association playoff. But toss a basketball into the NBA owners meeting, you'll probably hit one. And in the NFL, it isn't any different. This is from the Jewish Times. Who's in the owner's box? Jews. NFL players aren't overwhelmingly Jewish. But to no one's great surprise, Jews make up a reasonable portion of the community, starting at the very top, the owners. So this isn't any great shock. And you find this in industry after industry after industry. Let's check out the music industry.
Really rough, particularly on women. But I think it helped change the course of the crack epidemic. I don't know what's this opioid thing, man.
But being a crackhead wasn't cool back then. Being a crackhead wasn't cool. Now they seem like they're making it cool to be drinking lean and syrup and
it's the most dangerous. It's the most dangerous thing that's facing our society.
So why sign an artist that would promote that?
Because I already answered that question. You weren't paying attention. She asked me talent or issues, and I said talent. But I have to. I can't give up on people.
But I'm saying that's hypocritical, though. You're saying
it's opportunistic.
Yeah.
I got people to feed. 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 I got a business to run. I got a business to run. I got a business to run. I got a business to run.
You're gonna make Dame Dash take this clip and call you a culture vulture.
Who's Dame Dash? You brought him up. I don't even know him. So you bring his name up. I don't even know him. So
y'all made a lot of money together.
Made a lot of money.
Come on, Leo. Don't do that to him.
I don't know him. I really don't. So, I don't know what to tell you.
My beef was with Lior because I think he's a fake CEO and I think he's fronting on my culture, but he can't front on anybody else. And I'm calling him out publicly and I want him to stop trying to rape my culture. Go make some money with some other people. Like, stop having your agenda be hip hop. Like when Joey was like, our agenda to open up Asylum was to go, it didn't say nothing about going to get no rock and roll. It was go to get people that they don't even care about and make money from them. Yeah, just get money in their culture. Let them do it. Let's let the violence stay there. Let's benefit from the violence and not bring in, you know what I mean? It was like they have people that their job is to create beef so that they can monetize it, pause. But they don't let their culture feel it. But they make money from it, and they can't make any money or get any respect in their culture. That's why they're in our culture. Because the minute that they were allowed to be there, they would go. But they just can't. You know, the question should be, why don't you do something besides rap? And if you are all into rap, what have you done to give back to the community? I didn't know why that wasn't asked. Those were the questions that I was like, damn, if you're going to cross me, Combat Jack, Reggie Osei, ask some good questions. It almost looked like it was scripted. But, you know, It is what it is. It's the perfect example of what they always do to us. They always try to, offer some paper bag of money or whatever it is, whatever selfish agenda, which is the test, and then have us divide so they can benefit and take the fight off of them and put the focus on them. Never had a beef with Jay. Always with Leor and his whole crew. He's the one that ruined Rockefeller, Leor Cohen.
There was, when you talk about that situation, they gave Jay Rockefeller back after you guys sold it, right?
I don't know, man. I don't want to go back to that. I'm just talking about me having to beef with Leor Cohen. See? You see how it always transitions back to Jay? Leor Cohen. That's my beef. Pause. Not Jay.
What do you think about the new label? Was it 300?
I don't know nothing about whatever they doing. Whatever he's doing is robbing whoever he in business with. So whoever's in business with them, I suggest they check their paperwork. I bet you've given a lot of your ass is gone, about 360 of it. Maybe about 400 now. If he say 300, then he mean he taking 4.
I can tell you that Young Thug, I heard, was signed to 300.
So you should ask him about his contract.
He's managed by Birdman.
Okay, so I'm sure they didn't then. I'm sure they know who to rob and who not to. Like I said, I can't speak on anybody's business, but if there's any advice I could give, I will. But I just wouldn't advise working with him just based on my history. That's all. I know what he did with me. I know how he played, and I know that he doesn't care about the culture, and I know that he doesn't even feel that he has to even say anything. He's still walking around like I'm not questioning it, like he doesn't have to acknowledge it. I'm a relevant person from this culture, and I'm asking you a question publicly. What have you done for our culture? You cheated. And I'm calling him out publicly. I had things to do. I didn't have the time to do it before, and he was using Warner's money, and he was using Universal's money for his own agenda. And I'm not counting that man money. I'm just saying that's the way he rapes our culture. He says, he collects money from a bigger company and says, I'm gonna go get all this urban stuff, and then spends it on his kids and himself. Because that's what I saw him do in front of me. What you think about Leor?
I don't know Leor, I'll be honest.
Do you know anything that he's done in hip hop? Like all these questions, that was the person that was behind a lot of the stuff that was going on. Like that's what I mean. Why do y'all want to know about the rappers? Like aren't y'all curious? Like y'all been talking about the same thing for 5 years. Don't y'all want to know about the other side of the story? Ask about Leor, Todd Moskowitz, and all those players. Julie Greenwald. Ask them about their perspective on what happened. Why don't they get questioned? They make money off us every day. Let's make some money off them. Period. Like, let them see how it feels. Just reverse it. It's about perspective. Like, go interview Leor and ask him those questions. Vlad, call that man. Call Kevin Lowndes.
I don't think I've ever seen a Leor Cohen interview.
Exactly. Of course you don't see. Of course you don't see the puppet master. So it's time to see him. Bring him out. Call out Todd Moskowitz. He wearing a scarf. He running around acting like he doing something he not. He got a job because of nepotism. Ask them why they got their jobs. That's what I want to see. How did Joey get the job president of Urban, and what does that mean? I need to see credentials. And culturally, anyone that's taking orders from that man should be asking, why should I be taking orders from you? Period. And if you answer that question honestly, then maybe you'll feel better about it. But they're not even, dog, he got on the radio and said, I don't even care. What y'all? My questions was the same questions that everybody's asking. He don't care? I don't care. He said it. Joey said it. I don't care. How you feel about the culture? I don't care. How do you feel that someone relevant from the culture thinks you're robbing it? I don't care. And nobody's going to question that? All right, that's why I'm Dame. I'll just continue to be Dame. I'm going to have fun being Dame.
I mean, you talk about a lot of stuff about these various people, about Joey, about Todd, about Leor.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything specific, that really bothered you during that time? Because, it's kind of spoken in generality.
I already said the thing, the Max B thing. I already said the currency thing, the Jay-Z shit, all of that. I didn't like none of that shit. I don't like it, and it keeps happening. So I don't want it to happen no more. Too much divide and conquer. So that's it, man. I'm just saying reverse the perspective. Let's stop talking about rappers beefing. Let's start talking about these people and educating the culture, because the culture is articulate. So I want the culture, when you see it in public, to be smart. The fights should be smart. Let's focus on the intelligent part of our culture as opposed to the ignorant part. And let's start questioning the administrators as well. And let's just question it. I'm not saying they did anything wrong, but I think they can't just say, I don't care. I think I think they should at least be able to answer a question if it's asked in a respectful way. So I just want them just as famous as me. Leor Cohen, Julie Greenwald, Todd Moskowitz, Joey or Joey, whatever. There's a couple, but those I think we should start with them. And whoever hired Joey, I want to know why he got hired from Interscope. And I want to know what that title means, president of Urban, and why another black man should be calling him the president of Urban and asking him what he could do, what he can and cannot do. I think it's very disrespectful, and I think it should change. And I think there should be some social responsibility and some consciousness, and some people should question it. And I don't give a fuck because none of y'all cut my checks. None of y'all. Y'all can't affect none of my business. So I can say all of this. You can't blackball me because you can't hire me. None of y'all use your own money. So stop acting like you have the ability to blackball me. That's not the case. You can't. I blackball you, you know? I'm never gonna hire none of y'all. You're blackballed, all of y'all. So with that said, it's out there. I laid it out there. I think it should be intelligent. There's no violence. I just think that there should be questions asked. And I'm also posing it to everyone, every journal, every DJ. Start pulling those guys out for interviews and asking them the real questions.
I really hate to use a Breakfast Club interview because I don't really mess with them like that. And I truly hate to use the Vlad interviews that I'm using because he's one of those culture vultures as well. However, it was important for Dame to say what he said, and the other clip will give substance to other things. So let's talk about it, because it is no secret that over the years, black artists in the music industry has had historically messed up contracts. Like, this isn't something that we've been making up. We have data, we have evidence to show that, these are issues that's been going on when it comes to black artists. Hell, we've had our icons come out and tell us about these contracts and these people in the industry that's taking advantage of them. And every time they mention who these people are, I hate to say it, but it's always the same folk. So I don't understand why we ain't seeing the issue at hand here. I mean, Michael Jackson got up on stage and said himself, he said,
Tradition of great performers from Sammy Davis Jr. to James Brown to Jackie Wilson to Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly. The story is usually the same though. These guys work really hard at their craft, but the story ends the same. They usually are broken, torn, and usually just sad, and the story is very sad in the end because the companies take advantage of them. They really do. And Sony being the artist that I am at Sony, I've generated several $1 billion for Sony, several billion, and they really thought that my mind is always on music and dancing, and it usually is, but they never thought that this performer, myself, would outthink them.
Yeah! So if Michael Jackson, arguably one of the biggest, if not the biggest star on the planet in his time being on this planet, if he went through these issues and he called out these same people, same folks, as well as other artists in the black community, calling out these same folk, that don't seem suspicious. And as Dame said, there are so many of them making money off of our community. So many of them making money off of black artists. I mean, you look at Jimmy Iovine from Interscope. You got David Geffen. You got Clyde Davis, Jerry Heller, Tommy Mottola.
Tommy Mottola is a devil.
Rick Rubin, Lucien Goringe, Bill Ackman, Rob Stranger, Doug Morris, Kevin Keller, Stephen Cooper, Lynn Blafnick, who owns Warner Music, with Leor Cohen. I mean, the list goes on and on. Zach Horowitz, John Jamick, Barry Weiss, Steve Battelle, Paul Rosenberg, Rick Rubin, Ted Cockle, Peter Edge, Julie Greenwood, which Dame had already mentioned, Ed Bofferman, Ari Emanuel. Ari Emanuel, I mean, the brother of the goddamn Chicago mayor who covered up the murder of our black brothers. So this goes on and on and on. The list goes on and on. And you're trying to tell me that that's not influence? That's not running these companies? And then I come across this article. FBI files on Tupac Shakur murder show he received death threats from Jewish gangs. Now, when I first heard this, the first thing in my mind was, now wait a damn minute, what? Files state that Jewish Defense League had extorted money from various rap music stars by making death threats and then offering protection for a fee. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Everything that you're thinking right now, everything that's flowing through your mind, is exactly what flew through mine. Is exactly what flew through mine. But hold off on them thoughts. We're going to get to that in a hot second. Let's finish this article. Files released Thursday by the Federal Bureau of Investigations on the 1996 murder of rapper Tupac Shakur state that the star had received death threats from the Jewish Defense League, an organization that has been characterized as a terrorist group. Now, when the hell have you ever heard of the Jewish Defense League? I ain't never in my life heard of the Jewish Defense League. I ain't heard of the KKK. They didn't even make black nationalists or black conscious teachers so-called black extremists, and they blasted all over the mainstream media. But when it comes to the Jewish Defense League, we don't know nothing about it, and they've been extorting rappers for decades. They've been extorting rappers using death threats for decades, and nobody's talking about it. It's not nowhere in the news. No artists are talking about this to this extent. But for decades, the Jewish Defense League have been extorting black artists under the terms of death threats. So now a lot of the people in our community that's in these industries that just out of nowhere end up dead mysteriously, now it's all starting to make sense. It made sense before, but now it's tying into each other. Now we're able to see the connections in which we wasn't able to see before, because look, think about all the artists in the music industry that has just ended up dead. So on one hand, you have these people signing you to a messed up contract, stealing your money on that end. And then on the other hand, you have the Jewish Defense League coming to you and extorting you for money with death threats. The left hand washes the right hand. So I wanted to learn more about this story. So I went searching for more articles, which I found. And we're going to look at this one. FBI released documents on Tupac Shakur and terrorist threats the late rappers received. And this article painted a better picture. Following last week's release of documents on the investigation of the notorious B.I.G.'s 1997 murder, the FBI let files on fellow iconic rhymer Tupac Shakur loose today. His papers, however, focus more on the death threats he and his California peers received from the Jewish Defense League, a pro-Israel domestic terrorist organization, than his own 1996 murder. The September 1997 findings reveal that the Jewish Defense League and other yet identified have been extorting money from various rap music stars via death threats. Various unidentified. So they're not the only ones. The Jewish Defense League apparently would contact artists, Shakur included, by phone claiming that their lives were in danger, then offer their protective services for a fee. Before being shot to death September 7th in Las Vegas after attending a Mike Tyson fight, Shakur had been called by the group, though conclusive connections to his death has not subsequently been made. The docs also claim that late NWA member Eazy-E, real name Eric Wright, was also contacted by the Jewish Defense League before he died of AIDS in 1995. Now wait a damn minute. Wait a damn minute. You telling me Eazy-E, the man who founded gangsta rap, was being extorted by Jerry Heller's homeboys? Allegedly. I don't know if they're in connection. But he was being extorted from people within Jerry Heller's community? What? The man who created gangsta rap was being extorted. Also the man that just mysteriously died out of nowhere. None of the people that he had sex with contracted HIV. None of his children had HIV. But yet, he just ended up dead. These are the things that comes to mind when you read the article that the FBI released. And then another thing that comes to mind is something that Jackson's son said in court.
He testified that the King of Pop was excited about the comeback tour, but in the weeks leading up to his death, he became really, really skinny, and his body temp would go up and down. Prince said his father would cry after phone calls, saying, quote, "They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me." According to Prince, he was referring to AEG Live CEO Randy Phillips and his ex-manager, Dr. Tome Tome. Prince testified that Phillips visited Jackson's home and aggressively spoke to Dr. Conrad Murray the night before his father's death. Prince said, quote, "He was grabbing by the back of his elbow, and they were really close, and he was making hand motions."
Then shortly after the man's death, the people that he put in charge of his multi-billion-dollar estate sells his catalog back to Sony for $750 million, a multi-billion-dollar estate, which will accumulate billions of dollars over the years. That don't seem suspicious. Michael Jackson has been making overtly anti-Semitic remarks during a phone call describing Jews as leeches that conspired to leave him penniless. "They suck," Jackson said. "I'm so tired of it. They start out the most popular person in the world, make a lot of money. It's a conspiracy. Jews do it on purpose." Now, was Michael talking about all Jews? No! He was talking about the Jewish people within the music industry that take advantage of black artists. So when it comes to the question whether or not Jewish people have control of the media and other areas The answer would have to be most likely yes. Because in every single area that is Jewish led, black people are being oppressed and black people's image are being destroyed. Whether it is the media destroying black images every day, the imagery of the black man, the black woman, destroying the visual image of our people, whether it is the NBA, whether it is the NFL, they all take a part in the oppression of black folk, which is a perfect segue to the next segment. But before we get to the next segment, I want to make sure that you guys know this. Everyone knows this already, including the people who's out here acting as if they don't know it.
Is mental illness an excuse for bigotry? You know, no, I don't think so. And I know a lot of people who suffer from mental health issues who don't maneuver like that. And also, you're a multi-billionaire. If you know you have mental health issues, go get help. Simple as that. Like if you got access to every single resource available, go get help. But once again, that doesn't give you the right to be a bigot. You know, I'm sure there was a lot of Nazis with mental health issues. You know, that don't excuse, you know, them being Nazis. And, you know, if you attack black people and Jewish people within the span of a week, then you are indeed a Nazi to me.
Like Jews don't go out and try to recruit people into the religion like, you know, certain Christians and Muslims and stuff.
I'll be honest with you, I don't even feel comfortable talking about this. I'm sweating right now. There's certain things I don't like to talk about, and I love Jewish people, but they're powerful. I don't want them to misconstrue anything I'm saying or take anything I'm saying the wrong way. So I would much rather not even have this conversation. I have a lot of great Jewish people in my corner. I have a Jewish conglomerate. Yeah, absolutely. You know why there's not a lot of Jewish rappers? Because there's Jewish owners and Jewish CEOs. They run these labels. They're the bosses. Because there's Jewish owners and Jewish CEOs. They run these labels. They're the bosses. Because there's Jewish owners and Jewish CEOs. They run these labels. They're the bosses. That's why I'm uncomfortable.
What did Kanye say? He said, "Happy Kwanzaa to all the artists and
Happy Hanukkah to all the label execs." It's the truth. They run the business period, from Hollywood to the music industry, everything. And I mean, it's a very powerful mafia.
Right now, 360 deals are more common. Do you think that there's something inherently wrong with 360 deals?
100%. They're giving away what usually happens is when you sign a record deal, because it's corporate money, they spend a lot of money and a lot of people get paid and you don't really have too much margin. But everybody gets paid, but the artist. And the artist is cool with that because that's the commercial for them to go make their money selling their merch, which is their t-shirts, and make their money from their show. Now, you can't, I own your ass on the road and your clothes, and also every time you make money from endorsements. So you actually telling someone to give up their whole entire behind. And they shouldn't. And I've watched them trick people into thinking that after they built their foundation and they have their show and all the exposure is done, that they need them to go to the next level and then have them sell their whole entire behind away. 360, whole 360 degrees of your ass, pause, away, just because of a trick. And now you got to ask a person, or you have to say things like the label lets me do this and that. Like when you say, somebody can never say an artist is signed to me. That doesn't sound correct to me. I have partnerships with people, which I've always done. I believe a man should always be able to be a man. Pause. So I do 50-50 ventures no matter what. I never do, I sign you, I own you. I don't do that. The mentality doesn't sound right. People accepting that doesn't sound right. People being proud of that doesn't sound right. It's aggravating. Maybe because I'm aware and no one else is, but if you look back at all these YouTube tapes, every single thing I was saying 10 years ago, I'm saying it now. But just everyone thought I was crazy 10 years ago. So I'm not crazy now. My message is consistent. I walk it like I talk it. Pause. I'm not saying I agree with Fidel, but I pulled a Cuba. Like, I'm not messing with nobody. My whole thing is vertical, and I have a whole television network that reflects that. And you can see everything I've been doing while I've been slave broke. And slave broke is when someone that has a job considers you broke because you don't have any liquid, because all your money's in your businesses and your real estate and you got cash flow and independence. That's like a slave's fear. He's like, that's broke. But I'm independent rich, period.
You can call it religion, ethnicity, anything you want to. But its ultimate reality is that it is used to do what? Control the behavior and perceptions of other people in the interest of the people who belong to that thing. That's all it is. And the first question you ask, and so the thing goes out, you're anti-Semitic. Now, it doesn't matter what you said, whether you told the truth or not the truth, or this or that, has nothing to do with that. Not at all. It has to do, now the next question you're going to ask is, oh, how can I not be anti-Semitic? Don't say this, don't say that, don't do this, don't do that, and then we won't call you what? Anti-Semitic. And so when in striving to be what? Not anti-Semitic, you then what? Fall under the control of another people. Regardless as to whether they are right or wrong, or regardless of how unfair they are, as soon as you meet the requirements of not being called anti-Semitic, you're under control. And yet here's a people that's less than 3% of the American population, less than 1/10 of 1% of the world's population, who through the use of that term and through the throwing of that accusation can manipulate whole political and economic and social systems. And then they're the first ones to tell you that you shouldn't talk in terms of race.
And I know. I said I wasn't going to get into the Jewish people within banking. But if you really want some good information, come over to this article and read it. It's posted by the federal government, and it talks about how most U.S. banks correspond with the 3 major banks in Jerusalem. But I'll leave that for you to look up so you can make your own decisions on that. Because it would be too easy for me to make those links and correlations in that department. But let's move on to segment 2. While much of the film deals with historical and genetic arguments about various races and ethnic groups, it also includes extensive anti-Semitism, including claims of a global Jewish conspiracy to oppress and defraud black people, allegations that Jews are in part responsible for the transatlantic slave trade, and the claims that Jews falsified the history of the Holocaust in order to conceal their nature and protect their status and power. Now, that last part, I'm not even going to argue with. That's not even something that I agree with. However, when it comes to the Jewish community participation within black oppression, whether here or overseas, I mean, that's a fact. That's not something that can be disputed. I mean, even when you look at Israel, black Jews are being chased out of the Jewish community by racism. Here's their stories. If someone asks you to name the most urgent crisis facing the Jewish community, anti-blackness or intra-community racism might not be among your first thoughts, but it should be. That's because anti-blackness in the Jewish community is pushing black Jews out. Countless black Jews have made the difficult decision to leave Judaism completely. no longer identifying as a Jewish. Why did they leave those identities behind? They could no longer deal with the constant racism. Every person that I interviewed for this article spoke of being exhausted of existing in white Jewish spaces. They told me how that exhaustion greatly altered their perception in the Jewish community and their own Jewish identity. They spoke of feeling drained, mentally scarred, and depressed when they leave synagogue. People cannot thrive in communities that intrinsically sees them as outsiders, so they leave. I, too, am struggling with anti-black racism in the Jewish community, struggling to stay a part of the community that all too often I feel doesn't want me. Many times, I've considered giving up. Conducting these interviews was in a way validating, showing me I wasn't alone in my experiences or feelings. Validating and tragic. This article was written by Nyla Burton. So, even in Israel, Jewish people are oppressing black Jews there. So whether it's a global conspiracy, I can't say. But what we can say that it is a global fact. Maybe not everywhere around the globe is there people in the Jewish community doing this. However, where Jewish people are in power, it seems that black people are being oppressed. You have black people being called monkeys by the chief rabbis out there. It's no wonder why they feel the way they feel when they're leaving synagogue. And then, when the rabbi's publicists come out to try to explain away the situation, he goes on to say how the rabbi was quoting the Talmud. Now, for the people that don't know what the Talmud is, the Torah is what Jewish people go by. In Christianity, the Bible actually comes from the Torah, the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the Talmud is the Jewish rabbis' interpretation of the Torah. So the Talmud is basically law. It's basically law. So when you go through Israel and people are being anti-black, racist, it's something that's being taught as well. It's being taught as well. The oppression is being taught. It's being taught and it's being sanctioned by the state. But let's see their involvement within the slave trade itself. Came across this little nifty article, I guess. It says, Jews, slaves, and the slave trade, setting the record straight. And what this is a peer review of someone's work. And we're going to go over a few things. There are some audiences in North America today who find it difficult to understand past societies and their value systems. Say what? All right. What? And who think that transgressions in the past, however distant, invalidates activities or ideals of the present? Do you see this bullshit? It already starts off with trying to justify something here, ain't it? All right. For these people, the finding that even one Jew participated in the slave trade in the 18th century invalidates Jewish political support of civil rights and integration in the 20th century. Now, let me be very clear here. Does that invalidate Jewish support within the civil rights movement? Not so much. But does that nullify the fact that they participated within the worst atrocity known to man against the African people of these Americas? The descendants of American slaves? Not so much. Not at all. Not at all. And what gets me lit is that the wording and the way that they do the thing, you know, like the way that they do their thing really gets to me. Defining that even one Jew, as if it was a very small number. But I'm going to bring documents for today to show you that it was not a very small number. And that lie can be tossed out the window. One outcome of this has been a reinvented history of Jewish participation in the slave trade, which asserts that Jews were the majority. See how they use that word? Majority. That Jews were the majority of the slave owners in the United States and played a major role in the slave trade everywhere. It is in this context that Eli Faber wrote his scholarly book on the participation of Jews in the slave trade and slavery. He has provided the basic number that can be established on the relations between Jews and African slaves in the English and Dutch colonial worlds. His major findings is that Jews had a minuscule role in the slave trade and played only a minor role as slave owners wherever they resided in the New World. And I'm going to prove that to be false. I'm going to prove that to be a false statement. Okay? Of course, knowledgeable historians could have predicted the results of the book, given the circumscribed roles of Jews within European and American societies from the 15th through the 18th century. As Faber shows, the Jews were not a major factor in any international trade in the Anglo-Saxon world, except possibly the diamond trade. They were also not significant as planters or slave-owning farmers, except possibly in Suriname. And that's also a false statement that we're going to run right through when we get to those articles. But let's get back to this. To the extent that they own slaves, they tend to own fewer slaves on average than their non-Jewish peers. And we're going to show how that's false. This is just an article full of falses. No truths, just false. False, 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 false. A dozen or so participated. A dozen or so? A dozen or so? All right. A dozen or so participated in some aspects of the Atlantic slave trade to 1800s, with only about half a dozen being serious traders, and even this group moved a very tiny fraction of the total Africans brought to America. The largest group of Jewish slave traders in the British Empire, and the only ones who systematically engaged in the African trade over a long period of time, were the 3 or 4 Rhode Island Jewish. I tell you, the lies are real. The lies are real. We're going to go over to the Jewish Museum in London. This article here, Memento Mori, and the Dutch, and the Jewish involvement in transatlantic slavery. Let's go. The Atlantic slave trade, or transatlantic slave trade, that took place from the 16th to the 19th century, transported about 12 million enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to North and South America. This makes it the biggest forced migration in history. The majority of enslaved people were sold by Africans from central and western parts of Africa to European slave traders, who shipped them to the New World. The main European trading countries were Portugal, United Kingdom, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. The Dutch first participated in transatlantic slavery in the 1630s by transporting slaves to Brazil. Following that, the Netherlands also got involved in the slave trade to the Spanish colonies. In the 18th century, the country's most important slavery market were what are today Suriname and Guyana. Dutch Orthodox Rabbi Lodi van de Kemp wrote a book about Dutch-Jewish complicity in the transatlantic slave trade. He talks about the Jordan Savannah, Jewish Savannah, an agricultural community with 40 Jewish-owned plantations, with at least 5,000 enslaved people in part of former Dutch Guyana. Samir Drescher, a historian at the University of Pittsburgh, states the Dutch Jews may have accounted for the resale of at least 15,000 enslaved people on the Caribbean island of Curacao. According to Drescher, there was a time when Jewish people controlled about 17% of the Caribbean trade in Dutch colonies. However, Jewish involvement in transatlantic slavery is not unique, as wealthy merchants across Europe of different faiths all participated. They all participated. Now, let's jump over to this article. The uncomfortable truth of Jewish life in the U.S. South. A New Orleans museum that opened last month sheds light on surprising aspects of Jewish life in the 13 southern states since the mid-1700s. Ooh, this should be good. And notice a depiction. Yeah. But we're going to go in. An advertisement in North Carolina's Wilmington Journal in 1847 reveals a stain on local Jewish history. Ansley Davis, who came from Pittsburgh, Virginia, published the ad under the heading, Negroes Wanted. The text stated, I wish to purchase a large number of Negroes of both sexes, from the ages of 14 to 30, for which I will pay the highest cash market price. Davis, whose family owned one of the largest Jewish-run slave trading companies in the entire South, would tour the region every summer seeking new slaves, which he later sold. One of the largest slave-owning Jewish families in the South? I thought it was just a handful of Jewish people that partook. This is very interesting. Let's continue. Davis was not the only Southern Jew who made a living in the slave trade prior to the Civil War. David Wise of New Orleans also put up his slaves for sale at that time. Working out of his depot on the city's Bronze Street, has always on hand a large number of slaves which will be sold for cash, according to an old ad that he placed in the paper. A fine lot of young, likely able-bodied Negroes, girls and men, excellent field hands. By the time the war broke out, New Orleans was the largest slave trading city in the South. The stories of Wise and Davis are presented on the website of the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience, which opened in May in New Orleans, MSJE. As it is called, showcased the culture and heritage of the Jews who lived in the 13 southern states over a period spanning some 3 centuries. So for 3 centuries, this was going on. From colonial America through the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and up to today. Some 4,000 exhibits have been collected from Jewish communities and families in the small town before they disappeared from the map. The museum notes in one of its monthly newsletters, published online and as a part of its website for 2 years already, that Jews in America today are distraught knowing that their brethren were amongst the slave owners and traders of the past. And it adds that it is not trying to prettify this history. Southern Jews owned slaves in comparable numbers to their white non-Jewish neighbors. A few were active slave traders. Wait, what? I thought it was just about a dozen of them, a handful of culprits. But here, this says something totally different. And this comes from the same Jewish museum. So let's read this. Southern Jews owned slaves in comparable numbers to their white non-Jewish neighbors. A few, likewise, were active slave traders. Such facts have been used and widely exaggerated by antisemitics, but are amongst the uncomfortable truths of Southern Jewish history. So, not only is everything that the prior article stated incorrect, but Jews were able to own and trade slaves at comparable numbers to non-Jewish white men. The participation of oppression, the participation within oppression, is evident there. And when we get into how Jews became white, the Jewish became white, in the third segment, it's going to go deeper into how they did everything in their power in order to fit in with those non-Jewish white men. So if those men were oppressive, they had to be 10 times more oppressive. But now that we have the facts stating from the Jewish museum itself that Jews owned as many slaves in comparable numbers to non-Jewish white men, we can throw that statement in a trash can that there was only a handful of Jews that participated. Here's a list of some of those Jewish-owned ships, a list of the men who owned them, and also the names of those ships, if you guys want to go do your own research on it.
What I'd like to say as a young black youth is that I feel that America has subjected me to a Holocaust. You understand? From all my ancestors all the way back to even right now, Rodney King, the brother Staten Island, all we've been subject to is death and destruction here. And as far as Jewish people, in the Bible it say that ye are of the synagogue of Satan. And I'd like to ask you people, why do you feel that you have cornered the market on sympathy, and why can't you feel the pain of the black Holocaust? Why do you think that when we say the black Holocaust that it's some blasphemous statement? I'd like for y'all to address that.
Devin Noir receives research fellowships for language, anti-black racism, and American Jewish communities. Let's see what this talks about. Devin Noir, Isaac Aladef, professor in Sephardic Studies, associate professor of history and faculty at the Stroum Center for Jewish Studies, in spring 2022 was appointed as a fellow in the Race, Religion, and American Judaism project sponsored by the Center for Jewish Ethics and the National Endowment for the Humanities for his project, Our Own Worst Enemy: Historical Links Between Anti-Black Racism and Ashken Normality in the American Jewish Community. The project focuses on themes Noir developed in a 2019 cover story for Jewish Currents called Our White Supremacy Problem, Exposing the Roots of Intra-Jewish Prejudice, and in public talks such as Between Privilege and Peril, Jews and Structural Racism in the United States, which was a part of the Racial Equity Initiative of the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle. The Our Own Worst Enemy research will culminate in an article for educators at the Center for Jewish Ethics to be used in curricular materials. He also has received a 2022 to 2023 Yiddish Book Center's Translations Fellowship for translating from Ladino to English the project New York's first Ladino novella, Simon Nassim, and America, America, 1917. He is the first fellow working on a language other than Yiddish to receive the fellowship, a major milestone. I will be pulling clips from one of his talks, and we will be analyzing it, going over it, chopping it up, if you will.
Share may be troubling. It may be painful. It may be not what you were expecting or not what you learned in school or in your own encounters in the world. You may recoil at some of the things. You may disagree immediately with some of the things that I'm going to say. And I'd invite you to try to embrace that sense of ambivalence and discomfort and to grapple with that. And to grapple with your feelings as you process the history that I'm going to share with you, and also reflect on your own personal and institutional investments in some of the narratives and frameworks that I'm going to share with you. Now, of course, a discussion about structural racism, it's kind of a buzzword, and certainly Jews and race in the United States is a kind of a charged topic, and with good reason. But I'd like to emphasize the way in which Jews in the American experience have faced these two kinds of dynamics, both being targets and beneficiaries of racist, exclusionary, and oppressive practices, laws, and structures in the United States that have not only alienated Jews in general, and also and sometimes positioned them in places of power, even in positions of oppression, but have also resulted in the development of deeply seated, although sometimes very invisible, intra-Jewish prejudices that also may further alienate us from our neighbors. I want to begin sort of in the beginning, and you may be familiar when you think about American Jewish history, you may be familiar with the idea of America as kind of a safe haven for Jews persecuted in other parts of the world. You may think of America as an exceptional place. Jews have lived all over the world. They have experienced persecution and disadvantage. But no, America is different. In America, we've been protected. We've thrived here more than anywhere else. I'd like to push back a little bit on that narrative that we've inherited about American Jewish exceptionalism, because the first words that Jews encountered when the first Jews came to North America, to what is now New York City, known then as New Amsterdam, was the governor of New Amsterdam at the time, Peter Stuyvesant. There's his statue right there that can still be seen in Stuyvesant Square, I believe. He referred to the Jews as a deceitful race. Now, that's very interesting from a number of points, because he didn't want to let Jews, these were Jews who were escaping the Inquisition, Sephardic Jews who were escaping the Inquisition in Brazil, the Portuguese Inquisition, and they were looking for safe haven and harbor, and they came to this other colony, New Amsterdam, where they thought they might have a better opportunity. And the governor there was like, no way. I don't want Jews. They're going to ruin our society. They are a deceitful race. They're Christ killers, the whole thing like that. But you may know that in 1654, those first Jewish refugees wound up gaining entry into New Amsterdam. European Jews, when they arrive in the United States, will be conscripted, will be drawn in to the processes of indigenous people, the removal of indigenous peoples, and into the institution of slavery. Okay, and this will become very integral in terms of the kind of unspoken contract between Jews and the powers that be in North America. And this is reinforced in the context of the United States. You may be familiar with President Washington's famous letter in 1790. So we're going to be looking at like 5 different key moments. We're now in the second moment. We've jumped over nearly a century and a half, but we're now at the end of the 18th century. The Revolutionary War has been fought. The United States is now its own independent country. And Washington sends this letter to the Jewish community of Newport, Rhode Island. It's very, very famous. He talks about toleration. He says, look, the government of the United States gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. Now, this is really a remarkable document because on the one hand, it is a celebrated statement of tolerance that Jews will now be accepted in the nascent American Republic, but it also strikes tones of discord and dissonance because, as you probably know, Washington owned slaves. The founders and leaders of the Newport Synagogue owned and traded slaves. So what does it mean to give to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance? Who counts as everyone who shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree? In fact, the definition of who was a person at the foundation of this country did not include all of the kinds of people that we now consider people. At the time of the founding of the country, only white people were considered people. And why this document is therefore so important is it welcomes in European Jews into the family of white people who will be tolerated to live and to thrive and to be protected in the context of the United States. Not only that, however, what's also very important in this document is that there is also a reminder, an echo of Stuyvesant, that Jews are also different, that they constitute their own community of descent. Notice the language here, the children of the stock of Abraham. There is a genealogical identity here to Jews that will be and can be invoked in moments to ostracize Jews, to exclude them from that community of those who will be protected, of those who will be counted as white. Now, how do we know that really, you might be saying, well, it doesn't say anything about white. What are you talking about, white? Well, look at the date here, August 21st, 1790. August 12th, 1790. 1 week difference. The United States is holding its first Congress of the United States. And as part of the first Congress, they establish the terms of citizenship. What does it mean to become a citizen of the United States? There is only one criterion to become a citizen of the United States from the founding of the United States, with some modifications until 1952. Now, I know that some of you were born before 1952. You were alive when this law was still on the books and fully enforced and endorsed by the Supreme Court, which is that you had to be a free white person. Okay, if to reside for 2 years, whatever. but you have to be a free white person. In this context, free and white were redundant, but it was a way to emphasize that we're talking about white people who are not enslaved, indigenous people who are not enslaved or persecuted. It is about white people, the privileges and opportunities and rights afforded to citizens of the United States will only be available to individuals who can prove that they are free white people. And this is what we mean when we talk about structural racism. It's not everyday prejudice. They called me this kind of word, or they didn't, or they treated me in such and such a way. No, we are talking about the way in which racist ways of thinking that privilege certain races over other races are embedded in the very foundational laws of our society that structure how our society operates, how our government operates, that doles out protections and rights and privileges and excludes entire slivers and sections of the population from those very same rights and opportunities and protections. What's also very interesting about this law is if you go back to the first congressional proceedings and all of the notes about it from that time, you will see that they debated a lot of different things about what were the terms of becoming a citizen of the United States. Should it be 2 years or 3 years that you have to live there? They said, should Catholics or Jews be allowed? And they said, yes, as long as they're white people. Do you have to have a tryout period? Are you allowed to immediately hold office? Do you have to own land or not own land? Those things were debated, but the one thing that was not debated was whether anybody other than white people were going to be entitled to become citizens of the United States. To the contrary, the only argument that was made was maybe using the category free white person was too broad, and it would include too many people who might already jeopardize the status of the United States. Ben Franklin, for example, was infamously against letting Germans become part of the American community. Okay, Mordechai Sheftal, for example, he was from Savannah, based in Philadelphia. He had a 1,000-acre plantation in Georgia. He was the highest-ranking Jewish official in the Continental Army, and he owned dozens of slaves. And we know some of their slave names. And I want to read them for you. These are people who have been enslaved by Jews in the context of the foundation of this country. His slaves included London, Letty, Jack, Ben, Abby, Lucy, Venus, Albie, Ruth, Dick, Darby, Jim, Carolina, Polydor, Tracy, Rose, Prince, Lucinda, Clarissa, George, Jane, Joe, and Israel. The United States was not founded as a democracy among free white people, perhaps. It was established as a slavocracy. I say that as a descriptive term. The allure of privilege and protection and the power that came with whiteness was so strong that others would seek to enter or only be permitted to enter if they could demonstrate that they were not black and that they were not indigenous, that they could participate in the institution of slavery and in what was known then as Indian removal.
I played the first piece because I wanted you guys to see where they came and how they were treated. And once they received the power, or once they got into certain powers, how they moved to protect those certain powers. So the first part is a lot of history, and I get that. Really, he's a historian, so he goes over a lot of history regardless. But now we're about to get into the meat and potatoes.
19th century, we see these dual positions play out in one of the most celebrated figures in American Jewish history, the famous poetess Emma Lazarus. You've probably heard of her, or at least are familiar with her very famous poem that was affixed to the Statue of Liberty in 1903, posthumously, where she says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, learning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." She wrote this in the 1880s, thinking about and reflecting on and seeing firsthand the Jews who were arriving from Eastern Europe, fleeing the major pogroms that were taking place in the early part of the 1880s. At the same time that she can fight on behalf of Jewish immigrants seeking refuge in these shores, you have to think about the broader context out of which she came. How does someone like Emma Lazarus have the time to dedicate herself to writing poetry? Okay, you have to have some available time in your day that is not dedicated to work or to childcare or to any of the other major responsibilities that one might have, especially in the 19th century. Emma Lazarus was part of the New York elite society. Her family hobnobbed with the descendants of the founding fathers, the Knickerbockers, and all of those other kinds of people. She was descended from wealthy Portuguese Jews on one hand and German Jews on the other hand. Some of her relatives included Supreme Court Justice, the vice president of the New York Stock Exchange. How did her family become so wealthy? And this is very interesting. If you look at Wikipedia, it says the following, that her father, Moses Lazarus, was a wealthy Jewish merchant and sugar refiner. And if you dig a little deeper, you will discover that Moses Lazarus retired in 1865 when Emma was 16. Does the year 1865 maybe resonate with you in any way? Well, it likely had to do with the Civil War and the emancipation of the slaves who had been working on plantations in the South, including the Lazarus family sugar plantation in Louisiana. So I want to make that clear when I talk about privilege and peril. Emma Lazarus, the Jewish poet laureate, basically, of the United States, arguing to welcome the poor and huddled mouses, was raised in wealth accumulated on the backs of black men, women, and children enslaved by her father and her family. In this regard, Emma Lazarus and their role in slavery, her family's role in slavery among Jews, was typical for the era. There's a lot of anti-Semitic stuff that says Jews controlled the slave trade or Jews were more involved in slavery than others. That is not true. But they were involved in slavery like other white people. And this has very, very important ramifications for us thinking about that inheritance today. You know, even if you say, well, my family didn't come here until 1902 or till 1977. I have nothing to do with it. It's not true. You entered into a society, into a Jewish community structure that has been long in the works, that has benefited over the generations from the accumulation and transference of wealth and institutional power and knowledge. Take Gratz College, for example. It's trained Jewish educators over many generations that was endowed by profits derived from slavery. Hyman Gratz owned slaves. The Union of Reform Judaism, really the predecessor, but the Union of Reform Judaism, out of which conservative Judaism emerged, supported slavery on an institutional basis. Okay? They did not oppose slavery. Many Jews owned slaves. Many Jews who owned slaves supported the development of the foundational institutions of the Reform movement and later of the conservative movement in the United States. The first rabbi invited to address U.S. Congress was in 1860 a guy by the name of Morris Raffal, who was a pro-slavery rabbi, not in the South. We associate, the South, slavery. No, he was a pro-slavery rabbi in the North. He was the main rabbi at New York City's flagship Ashkenazi synagogue, B'nai Jeshurun. And he went to Congress giving a pro-slavery speech arguing that the Torah justifies slavery.
Did you get that part? And it's the same old script, because Chief Rabbi, he goes off, say a bunch of racist shit, and what is the response to the backlash? His publicist saying, oh, well, he was quoting the Talmud.
Justifies the enslavement of African non-humans. So did Emma have a perspective on slavery herself? We don't know. She wrote about the Civil War. She wrote with feelings of nostalgia about plantation life in the South, but she never spoke about slavery.
Now, when he said that, that was very disingenuous. She never wrote about slavery. She wrote nostalgically about plantation life, but she never wrote about slavery or her views on slavery. Yeah, she didn't have to write about her views on slavery because she was living the life that a slave master lived. That's why she was able to go out and do all these poetries and, write all this poetry and do all the little stuff that she was able to do because of the fact that she had slaves. And she wrote nostalgically about plantation life because of the fact that she didn't have to do nothing. Her father built a whole empire off the back of slaves and then retired when slaves were freed. But then you want to say, oh, well, she never spoke about slavery. But she did speak about plantation life nostalgically. That's the type of stuff that I want you to see too. Even when they're coming out trying to give information, they sit here and try to downplay the roles of a lot of these people. You can hear this man say it several times. Well, this is just the times that they were living in.
In her writings, she never spoke about emancipation. She also never wrote about the poor and the hungry people living right under her nose in New York City, nor about the Irish servants that her family employed after the family slaves had been emancipated. How does someone like Emma Lazarus move from coming from a slave-owning family embedded in the white elite circles of America to gaining sympathy for her own Jewish identity, as well as for the Jewish identity of those coming from Eastern Europe at the time? This has to do, I would argue, with her encounter with Ralph Waldo Emerson, very famous transcendental philosopher, poet of the era, and he invited Emma Lazarus to meet with him. When he did, his daughter was completely shocked. She wrote something to the effect of, "How could you have social discourse with an unconverted Jew?" And as far as we can tell, Emma Lazarus was the only Jewish person that Ralph Waldo Emerson ever interacted with on a person-to-person basis. He was impressed by her poetry, but when he compiled his famous collection Parnassus in 1874, the greatest poems of the day, he did not include anything that Lazarus wrote. She felt snubbed, and she wrote a letter to Lazarus to ask what happened, and he never replied, and she attributed her exclusion to the fact that she was Jewish.
In the black community, we call this a nigga wake-up moment. She thought that she was high and mighty. Her family kicks it with the founders' families, and you foot around with some of the most powerful and wealthy people in the country. But when it comes down to the equality and the equity of the situation, you're left out to dry. And you start to realize, like, we are not on the same footing here. We're not on the same footing here. She's like, I did everything that I'm supposed to do in this system of white supremacy, and you're telling me we're not on the same footing? Oh yeah, I'm sure she was pissed. I'm sure of it.
And that exclusion was a big shock to her because she thought of herself as part of the elite of American society, of the white elite of American society. But she recognized there was a limit. And scholars who've looked very deeply at the writings of Emma Lazarus have suggested that this was a moment when she began to turn inward, to explore her Jewish self, and outwards as she began to take stock of what was happening to Jews in Eastern Europe, and she began to develop an affinity.
Now I want you to pay very, very extra attention to the next clip that I'm about to play,
which is the case of Leo Frank. This again reveals the ways in which Jews could be targets of anti-Semitism and also perpetrators of racism. A little context. Frank was from Texas. He was raised in New York. He became the president of the B'nai B'rith in Atlanta, Georgia in 1912. He was the foreman of a pencil factory outside of Georgia. And at a certain point during his tenure in 1913, a young Irish American woman who worked in that context was found dead in the building of the pencil factory. And Leo Frank, it's a very long story, I'm not going to get all of it right now. Leo Frank was accused and he was found guilty. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court where the ruling was sustained. But the Georgia governor eventually commuted the sentence from capital punishment to life imprisonment. And the local white, not Jewish community did not like this idea that he would be exonerated for killing one of their women, one of their Christian women, Catholic in this instance, but nonetheless Christian white women. And he was broken out of jail, lynched in Mary Fagan's hometown of Marietta the next day. No one was charged with the murder. Eventually, he was pardoned by the state of Georgia in 1986, like 70 years later. The linchpin here is the issue of the witness. The witness, one of the key witnesses, was a black janitor. Now, what's interesting here, when I talk about scripts of anti-Semitism and anti-black racism, living in this society, you enter society, you find out how people talk, and you learn how people talk, and you use those scripts in strategic ways.
So all the bubble bust kids that think that they don't know what the hell they're doing when they're speaking to you the way that they're speaking to you and they're acting the way that they're acting, he just basically told you that it's bullshit. Because there's a way that they go about things. There's a way that they speak. There's a way that they implement the way that they implement things. They make sure to do these things in a certain way because it's a script already. They've already read that script. It's like when you go work for a company and you've never sold nothing in your life, but what ends up happening is, oh, you don't have to worry about that. Just read the script. Once you learn the script, you can tune it up, fine tune it, and make it a part of you. But read from the script if you're not comfortable. Read from the script when you don't know what to do or say. Don't that sound familiar?
Think about over the summer. You may be familiar with an instance in which there was a white woman who called the police on a black man in Central Park, saying that the black man was threatening her life. He wasn't threatening her life, but this white woman knew that if she said that, people would respond, that was something that people know the idea of black men being threats to women. Well, this is a script that is not a new script. This is a very old script that has already been written, and you can recite the lines of that script when you need to. So what was the chief defense that the Jewish defense team of Leo Frank used to try to discredit the black janitor's testimony? You'd have to pardon the language here. They denounced the janitor as a dirty, filthy, black, drunken, lying N-word.
A dirty, filthy, black, drunken, lying Negro. Did you catch all of that? Because this is exactly what we're talking about. On both sides of the coin, there is a heads. But then you want to convince us that head does not exist, That head doesn't exist. There's a tails to the side. But when you talk to Jewish people about their role in our oppression, none of this shit comes up. And it ain't like they don't know this history. They know this history.
This is Jews defending a Jew. Okay, this is invoking one of the most the most foundational anti-black tropes and ideas that exist in the canon. This is the kind of idea that was disseminated by D.W. Griffith's film A Birth of the Nation. This is an idea that was supported by the KKK. So Jewish lawyers defending a Jew against an anti-Semitic accusation by using the rhetoric of the Ku Klux Klan.
So what is he saying here? He's saying that Jews have no problem using the tools within the white supremacist toolbox in order to protect their own.
Privilege and peril, okay? It was even seen as anti-Semitic at that time. Talk about the uses and abuses of anti-Semitism. Some said to even use the testimony of a black person against a Jewish person was anti-Semitic, because what that did was it denied Leo Frank his real status as a white person, that he deserved to not be subjugated to the views and opinions of someone who is beneath him, namely a black person.
So here you have them using their tool once again to say, oh no, it's anti-Semitic to even listen to that black man's testimony. That's anti-Semitic because that goes against the whole rules of being white. Remember, because I'm white and I say so? Well, I'm Jewish and I'm considered white, so I say so. That's anti-Semitic.
Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, you may be familiar with him, very famous American rabbi, came to Leo Frank's defense saying that crimes against women are not typical of our race. They're not typical of European Jews. But they are typical of black people. You have the wrong idea here. So this is the scenario, privilege and peril. The scripts can be used in different ways, and it also reveals the general vulnerability of Jews in American society at this time. By this time, there's a whole new discourse that has entered world society, including in the United States. A new term is introduced to the lexicon, and that term is anti-Semitism, which is not an ancient term. It is a term that is coined in Germany in the 1870s and is soon used in the United States and every language in European society. And the idea of anti-Semitism is different from the earlier idea of colonial racism, where everything is black and white. No, this is about scientific knowledge using anthropology, linguistics, ethnology, these scientific disciplines to demonstrate and prove the existence of racial differences that you might not even be able to see. So even if somebody like Jacob Frank might look like a white person, he has in his blood degenerate characteristics that mark him as a Jew, mark him as less than real white people, and mark him as less deserving of equal treatment and protection than real white people. And this was the craze of the late 19th and early 20th century, not only anti-Semitism, but race science thinking, eugenics thinking, social Darwinist thought. Teddy Roosevelt, Alexander Graham Bell, John D. Rockefeller, Margaret Sanger, Helen Keller, George Bernard Shaw, Winston Churchill, Lord Balfour, they were all eugenicists. They all believed in race science.
Let me translate that for you. They all believed in anti-blackness.
And so you have the convergence of this colonial discourse of anti-black racism with a modern discourse of scientific anti-Semitism, both of which come together in this very disturbing and unfortunate instance in the Leo Frank case.
Some time ago, one of our Queen sisters, NYC Mary J., actually hosted a live where she was basically trying to have the black and Jewish community come together, talk about the issues, and then figure out how we can move forward from that point. I want to show you exactly what the promotion video was and is.
The relationship between the black and Jewish communities has a long history of being tumultuous, and with recent events, these tensions have resurfaced. This proves that both collectives need to have a very mature and respectful dialogue. Tomorrow, Friday, October 28th at noon, Eastern Standard Time, there will be a town hall meeting on TikTok Live. This is an invitation to the Black and Jewish communities on TikTok. Are you willing to speak your truth? Are you willing to hear someone else's truth? After hearing uncomfortable positions, do you have the discipline to respond maturely? We are asking for people to register for this event. Please know it will be heavily moderated. Friday, October 28th, noon, Eastern Standard Time, a Black and Jewish community town hall. Share this event. Register. Show up. Speak your mind. Respect the people. Respect the pain. Respect the process.
So I attended, and one of my comments was there is no Black and Jewish communities. There's Black communities in everyone else. And I explained how, like I was saying in my previous video, if we allow these people to do this to Kanye, it's a slippery slope. They can do it to anybody that's Black, and they will do it to anybody that's Black. And as I'm explaining the history and going over some of the things that, really concerned me, a Jewish man jumped in, and I guess he had a previous relationship with the host, as well as another brother that was inside of the live as well. To make a long story short, he heard some of the things that I was saying, and he came in. One of the things he came in real smug, talking about, well, you say Jews benefit from things. I've never gotten a check from the banks and all this other stuff. And just basically being that guy. You know how when you're talking about white supremacy to a white supremacist, and they try to tell you how they don't have any privilege because they work hard every day and all this other stuff. Yeah, he was one of those guys. Long story short, I was actually cut out due to a phone call. But when I came back in, apparently this guy went off, and he was going off on the brother and the sister, talking about, and I know you guys for this long, and this, and I've always been respectful, and I can't believe you would allow him to do this, and this. And now, in the promotion itself, it says that, there is going to be a heated topic. And I didn't really have a problem with the person having a problem with what I was saying. But apparently, by the time I got back in, the guy he left or whatever, but he had called Queen's sister, NYC Mary J., called her a bunch of anti-Semitics and called her a bunch of names, and then went on to do videos talking to his followers, telling them how X amount of people are anti-Semitic, and how he's afraid for his life, and how people get hurt because of the things that we were saying. And then he told his followers to go over to that woman's page, a Black woman's page, and harass her. This is what prompted me to make this video. Because the anti-Semitic BS is just that. It's BS. We're not running around here saying that these people deserved what they got during the Holocaust. That's anti-Semitic. We're not running around here saying that you people should not be here, or you shouldn't get half the benefits that you got and all this other shit. Really? We could say all of that shit, because Black people are the only people on this land that has no faults when it comes to anybody else's race. We have not been involved in any type of oppression towards anybody else's race. We have not been involved in any type of situations to where they can point at us and say, y'all did this. But yet, they can sit here and talk all kind of shit about us. But when we sit here and call out the disrespectful anti-black racism, oh, now you're anti-Semitic. So what was important for me to take the research that I had and make this video so that my fellow brothers and sisters, we stop caring about that title, that label that was created in order to make us care about the fact that we're being told that we're being anti-Semitic. Right back under control. Right back under control. Where's these same people when you have all of these Jewish people coming out in blackface? When you have all these Jewish people coming out calling us niggas and niggers and all of these racist, bigoted slurs? Where are these people when we're asking about our reparations? You get people like Bernie Sanders talking about, no, the reparations is divisive. It's divisive. What we need to do is worry about everything else but reparations, because that's not divisive. I did this video because I'm tired. And I'm pretty sure we're all tired. So, I made this video in order to address the tool that these Jewish people had in their toolbox for all this time, that they pull out whenever they feel it fits them, whenever they decide it fits them. And to all the black people that love to jump on the bandwagon for everybody else, just shut the fuck up. Just sit down somewhere and go paint your face white, because that's what you want to be. That's what you want to be, because you run around, you put on the cake for everybody but your own damn people. So whatever it is within your face that makes you hate your whole race, you need to go talk to somebody and fix that shit. Because you are the evil in our community and a detriment to our people. I'd like to thank anybody and everybody that made it this far, who took the time to listen. And I just want to thank you guys just for being the community that you are. Be one. I love every one of you. And if you want to support, best way to do it right now is to sign up for the Patreon. We got a couple more platforms that we're going to be bringing out real soon, but the Patreon is going to be the #1 source to get all my newest videos. It's going to go there first after this video. This video is going on every platform at the same time. But after this video, my up-and-coming videos will be going to Patreon before anything. And we're going to be doing like discussions. I want to do a watch along for this for the video that I actually clipped. So we can actually go through the whole video and not just little pieces. But once again, much love to you. Hit that like, hit that share, subscribe if you ain't subscribed. Peace.